I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life,
Whispers of betrayal shook the palace when a shocking truth slipped into the royal halls. According to insiders, King Charles was left furious after learning that Queen Camilla had secretly tried to remove Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis from his will. "This is not your decision to make," he reportedly told her, his voice cold and final. The tension rose so high that Charles made a move no one expected. He ordered Camilla to leave. Now the royal walls hide a storm, and the world is waiting to see if this is the moment their fragile peace shatters for good. Whispers before dawn. The first light of morning crept through the tall windows of the royal chambers, painting the walls in pale gold. The palace was quiet, too quiet, as if the very air held its breath. King Charles stirred in his bed, his eyes opening to the soft hum of silence. Yet something inside him felt uneasy. It was not the kind of restlessness that comes from poor sleep. It was deeper, heavier, a whisper in his chest that told him something was not right. He rose slowly, the weight of his robe settling around his shoulders like the weight of his crown. The familiar rooms, grand and gilded, offered no comfort. Every step he took toward the sitting area felt measured, deliberate, as if each footfall carried him closer to an answer he wasn't sure he wanted. His mind drifted, unbidden, to Charlotte and Louis. Charlotte with her sharp eyes and quiet grace, always curious, always watching. Louis with his boundless energy, his laughter echoing through the halls like sunlight breaking through clouds. They were the heartbeats of the family, the small treasures he hoped the world would treat kindly. He thought of the afternoons they spent together, Charlotte's tiny hands holding a teacup far too big for her, Louis tugging at his sleeve to show him some new discovery in the gardens. In those moments, he was not the king but simply a grandfather. It was a role that filled him with a warmth no title could give. But the warmth faded quickly as he reached the breakfast table. The place opposite him was empty. The silverware gleamed, the porcelain plates were set, but there was no sign of Camilla. She was never late for breakfast, not without sending a note, not without a word. He sat down, his fingers resting on the edge of the table, tapping lightly against the linen. "Where is she?" he murmured to no one in particular. A footman entered quietly and bowed but offered no explanation. Minutes passed, the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece sounding louder with each second. Charles lifted his teacup, but the taste was dull on his tongue. His thoughts would not stay still. Was she unwell? Was something wrong? Or was this absence deliberate? The door opened again, this time revealing a familiar figure, one of his most trusted aides. But the man's face was pale, his movements stiff, as though he carried something heavy, something that burned to the touch. He walked forward, each step making the air grow colder. In his hands was a sealed envelope, thick and cream-colored, the wax bearing a mark Charles recognized at once. The aide bowed low, his voice steady but quiet. "Your Majesty, this arrived for you." It was marked, "Private." Charles took the envelope, feeling the weight of it, not just in paper but in what it might contain. His thumb traced the seal, and for a moment he didn't move. A strange stillness filled him, like the hush before a storm. He looked up at the aide, his eyes searching. "Who sent this?" The man shook his head. "It came from the legal office, sir. Directly." That word, directly, rang in his ears. Charles dismissed him with a small nod, and the aide left the room, closing the door softly behind him. But what was in the envelope, we will find out in the next chapter. The paper that broke the silence. The wax seal gave way with a sharp crack, and the envelope slid open in King Charles's hands. The paper inside was thick, smooth, and heavy, the kind used for matters of great importance, the kind that always carried weight far beyond its physical form. He unfolded it slowly, the sound of the parchment whispering through the quiet room. His eyes landed on the heading at once: Amendments to the Last Will and Testament of His Majesty King Charles III. For a moment his breath caught in his chest. Amendments? He had made no request for changes. He scanned the first lines quickly, his eyes moving faster as the words began to blur together. And then he saw them. The names, or rather the missing names. Charlotte, Louis, nowhere. The space where their names should have been, the space he had always made certain they occupied, was gone. Clean, empty, erased. His hands froze on the paper. His heartbeat quickened. He read the sentence again, then a third time, as if the words might change if he stared hard enough, but they remained cold and final. The draft stated that his beloved grandchildren, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, would no longer be direct beneficiaries of his will. A deep, quiet shock rolled over him like a sudden wave. His eyes moved downward to the signature line. And there, in neat black ink, were words that did not belong to him. A handwritten note to the royal lawyers, short but clear. Proceed with this adjustment as discussed. The handwriting was unmistakable. Camilla. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. He blinked once, twice, and the quiet room around him suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. A strange ringing filled his ears. It was not only the act itself that stung. It was the secrecy, the quiet, deliberate nature of it. And then, without meaning to, his mind pulled him backward, to conversations he had once brushed aside. It was a rainy afternoon months ago, the kind where the palace gardens blurred into a wash of gray. They had been sitting in the study, a fire crackling softly, when Camilla had first mentioned it. "You know, Charles," she had said lightly, almost as if speaking of the weather, "it might be wise to simplify matters. The inheritance. Focus it where it will truly strengthen the crown." He had looked up from his papers, brow raised. "Simplify?" "Yes," she replied, swirling the tea in her cup. "Too many hands, too many divisions. It weakens the structure. Concentrating resources could be beneficial." At the time, he had thought little of it. He assumed she meant trimming unnecessary expenditures, cutting certain ceremonial costs. "We'll discuss it another day," he had said, moving the topic aside. Another time over dinner, she had brought it up again. "William's children will always be provided for," she had said, a hint of firmness in her voice. "Some of them will inherit titles, positions, estates. Perhaps not all need the same share." He had frowned slightly then, but let it go. It was late and the day had been long. He chose not to argue. Now those passing remarks were no longer harmless musings. They were the roots of this, the paper in his hands, the removal of two innocent names. Charles set the draft on the table before him, his fingers splayed across it as though holding it still might also hold back the anger beginning to rise in him. "Why?" he whispered to the empty room. The answer did not come, only the quiet hum of the clock on the mantel, ticking each second into the air. His disbelief was sharp at first, but it was giving way to something else, something deeper, the hurt of betrayal. The cold realization that this had been planned without his knowledge, executed with precision. Charlotte, with her gentle curiosity, who always asked about the stories behind the crown jewels. Louis, who ran to him with open arms, laughing, calling his name. What could they possibly have done to deserve this? The thought made his jaw tighten. He reached for the paper again, reading each line with the scrutiny of a man searching for a crack in stone. But it was airtight. This was not an error. It was deliberate. His hand curled slightly, the paper crinkling under his grip. In his mind, images came unbidden. Charlotte's hand in his, Louis's giggle in the corridors, their small faces lighting up at the sight of him. He thought of the world they were growing into, the responsibilities that would one day rest on their shoulders. And now, someone had tried to take from them not only a gift, but a promise. The anger rose higher. It was not loud, roaring anger, no. It was the kind that sat cold and steady in the chest, the kind that could not be soothed with easy words, the kind that came when trust was broken in the quiet. His lips pressed into a thin line. "This is mine to decide," he said aloud, the sound of his own voice startling him. "Mine." He stood, the paper still in his hand, his eyes fixed on the far wall, but seeing only the face of the woman who had written those words. Camilla. The thought of her doing this in secrecy made his chest tighten. He could almost hear her voice in those past conversations, dressed in soft tones but edged with resolve. At the time, he had thought she was speaking in theory. Now he saw the truth. It had been intent all along. So what did Charles do? How did he handle the heat? Let's find out. The question that cut through silence. The grand sitting room was bathed in pale afternoon light, but for King Charles the brightness brought no warmth. He sat alone, motionless, the heavy paper still in his hand. The draft of the will lay folded neatly now, but its weight seemed to press against his chest as if it were made of stone. The clock above the fireplace ticked on, marking each second with sharp precision. Charles's gaze rested on the door across the room. He was waiting, not just for her arrival, but for answers. Answers he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. His fingers tightened slightly on the folded paper. The lines from earlier still rang in his head, each word etched like a scar. Charlotte and Louis removed, not by mistake, not by his hand. The door finally opened. Camilla stepped in, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. She was dressed in a soft cream suit, pearls at her neck, her hair perfectly arranged. Her expression was light, almost pleasant, as though she had just come from a quiet afternoon of reading. "Charles," she said with an easy smile, "you look serious. Is something wrong?" He didn't return the smile. Instead, his eyes fixed on her, steady, unblinking. The room felt still, the air thick. "Why?" His voice was low, deep, and carried no trace of warmth. She paused mid-step, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "Why? What?" "You know what I mean," he said, his tone like the slow tightening of a rope. "Why did you do it?" Camilla tilted her head slightly, a faint crease forming between her brows. "Do what?" Charles held up the folded paper, his hand firm. "This, the changes, removing Charlotte and Louis from my will. Tell me why." There was a moment, just a moment, where her eyes shifted. Then she gave a soft sigh, walking further into the room. "I thought," she began carefully, "that it was for the best, for the crown. We must be practical, Charles. Too many divisions weaken the future. Sometimes, difficult choices are necessary." He stood slowly, the sunlight falling across his face. "Difficult choices?" His voice sharpened, though it remained quiet. "These are my grandchildren, Camilla. They are not numbers to be reduced. They are not pieces on a board for you to move at will." She held his gaze, but her chin lifted slightly. "They will be well cared for. They have William. They have titles, influence. This would only focus the resources where they are most needed. I was thinking of the long-term strength of the monarchy." Charles's jaw tightened. "The monarchy is not built by cutting away those who belong to it. It is built on loyalty, on love, on the ties that hold us together. You speak of strength, but you do not see that what you have done weakens more than you could ever imagine." The room seemed smaller now, the distance between them heavy with unsaid words. Camilla crossed her arms, her voice low. "I was acting in its best interest. You have to think of what will keep the crown secure for decades. Sentiment cannot cloud judgment." "Sentiment?" Charles's voice rose just enough to make the servants near the doorway glance at each other. "Is that what you call it when a grandfather ensures his grandchildren's place in the family's legacy? Sentiment?" The air in the room felt heavier, the kind of weight that made every movement slow. The servants in the corner exchanged quick looks, then bowed quietly and slipped from the room, closing the door behind them. Now it was only the two of them. No audience, no buffer. "You could have spoken to me," he said, his voice returning to a quiet, icy edge. "You could have brought your concerns, your suggestions directly to me. Instead, you went behind my back. You gave instructions in my name. You acted as though you held the final say over my will." "I acted because I knew you wouldn't do it yourself," Camilla replied evenly. "You are too attached to them. You cannot always see what is necessary." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a deep, deliberate tone. "Do not mistake kindness for weakness. Do not mistake love for blindness. And do not—" His words slowed, his eyes locked on hers. "Ever assume you can decide for me what my family means to me." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty touched her expression. "You speak as though I've done something unforgivable," she said quietly. "You have," he answered without hesitation. The silence that followed was thick. Neither moved. The paper in Charles's hand felt like the center of the storm, small, fragile, but capable of tearing apart everything if not handled with care. He turned from her slightly, as if looking at her had become too much. The sunlight had shifted, casting the room in long gold shadows. "This will not stand," he said finally. "Not today, not ever." Camilla's lips pressed together, but she said nothing. She adjusted the sleeve of her jacket as though the gesture could steady her. Charles looked at her one last time. "We will speak again, but understand this, Camilla. You have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed." In the next act, we will explore their next meeting, when voices broke the crown's calm. The walls of the grand sitting room seemed to lean in as the air between them thickened. Charles stood near the window, the folded will still in his grip, while Camilla remained a few paces away, her chin lifted but her eyes restless. The earlier quiet was gone, replaced by a sharp tension that hung heavy in the gilded space. Camilla was the first to speak, her tone calm but carrying an edge. "Charles, you're looking at this as if I've taken something from them. I haven't. Charlotte and Louis will never go without. They will inherit more than most children could dream of. William will provide for them. They already have plenty coming from his side." Charles turned sharply, his voice tight but rising. "Plenty? Is that your measure? Is this about counting what they have or deciding what they should mean to me?" "It's not about what they mean to you," she said quickly. "It's about securing the future of the monarchy. Every decision must strengthen the crown. Too much division of resources weakens it. You cannot run this family as though it's just a household. It's an institution, Charles." His jaw tightened. "And yet it is my household, my blood, my grandchildren. You speak as if they are entries on a ledger. They are not figures to be balanced, they are children." Camilla's eyes flashed. "You can't allow sentimentality to cloud what must be done. I am not doing this out of cruelty. I am thinking ahead, to what will make the crown endure. That is my responsibility too." "Responsibility?" His voice hardened. "Your responsibility is not to decide the worth of my family. Your responsibility is not to play politics with the futures of two innocent children." "You make it sound like politics is some dirty game," she replied, her tone sharpening. "Politics is survival for the monarchy. We cannot afford to be careless." Charles took a slow step toward her, his eyes locked on hers. "We cannot afford to be heartless either. And you, Camilla, have shown a coldness I never imagined I would see from you." Her lips parted as though to respond, but his voice cut through the space before she could. "Do not tell me this is for the good of the crown when it is done in secret, without my consent, against my wishes." "It was not against you," she insisted, though her voice carried a defensive tremor. "It was to help you, to ensure your legacy is solid." "My legacy," he said slowly, his tone like steel, "is not solid if it is built on betrayal. My legacy is not stronger when my grandchildren are erased from it." For a moment, neither spoke. The ticking clock filled the silence until Camilla finally stepped forward, her voice more insistent. "Charles, listen to me. The monarchy has always been about hard choices. Sometimes we must put aside personal feelings for the sake of the crown's strength. If you give too much to everyone, you risk giving nothing to the future." His eyes burned with quiet fury. "The future is those children. Charlotte with her sharp mind and her grace, Louis with his spirit and his joy. They are the future, Camilla. Not just the crown itself, but the life within it." Her hand twitched slightly as though she wanted to reach for him but thought better of it. "You're letting emotion lead you." "And you," he replied, "are letting ambition blind you." The space between them crackled. Then, with a sudden burst of motion, Charles's hand came down hard on the table beside him. The sound echoed through the room like a crack of thunder. "You do not decide the worth of my grandchildren." His voice was no longer cold and measured. It was fierce, unyielding, and it filled every corner of the room. Camilla took a small step back, her face paling. She had seen Charles angry before, but never like this. The steadiness in his tone had turned into something stronger, something immovable. "Charles," she began, her voice softer now, but he held up a hand to stop her. "No," he said firmly, "do not try to soften this. Do not tell me I've misunderstood. I have the paper. I have the proof. I know exactly what you did, and I know why." Her shoulders dropped slightly. She looked at him, searching for an opening, for some way to make this less damning. "Perhaps I went about it the wrong way," she admitted. "Perhaps I should have spoken to you first. I only thought—" "You thought you could act without me. You thought you could take what is mine to decide and shape it in your own image. You thought wrong." The room seemed colder now, the warmth of the afternoon sun doing nothing to ease the chill between them. Camilla's voice was almost pleading. "Charles, I was trying to help. You must see that." "What I see," he said quietly, his voice once again low but heavy with finality, "is that you acted in the shadows. And when someone does that, it is not help they're giving. It's control they're taking." A crown divided. The day had turned cold inside the palace, though the sun shone brightly beyond its ancient stone walls. The grand rooms felt vast and empty, the silence broken only by the soft tick of a distant clock. King Charles stood motionless near the tall window of his private study, his hands clasped behind his back, his face shadowed with resolve. The storm from earlier had passed, but its echo still lingered in the air. Camilla entered quietly, her voice carrying a fragile edge. "Charles, must we end the morning like this?" He turned to her, his eyes steady, his tone cold and measured. "We will end it, yes, but not in the way you expect." She frowned, stepping closer. "What do you mean?" He drew in a long breath as though steadying himself. "You must leave," he said, each word falling like a stone. "For now, and perhaps for good." Her breath caught. "Leave?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious," he replied. The calm in his tone carried more weight than any shout could. "This is not a decision made in haste. It is made because I must protect what matters." Her eyes darted toward him, searching for a hint of hesitation, but found none. "You would cast me out over this?" she asked, incredulous. "This is not about casting you out," he said, his voice tightening. "It is about boundaries you chose to cross. It is about my grandchildren and the future they deserve." Camilla took a step back, as though the air between them had suddenly turned to ice. "I did what I thought best," she muttered. "And in doing so," Charles said, "you forgot the simplest truth. Love is not measured by advantage or gain." The quiet deepened until even the faint ticking clock seemed loud. Charles turned slightly and addressed the doorway. "See that her belongings are prepared, discreetly." A pair of servants, who had been waiting just out of sight, bowed and moved silently away. Camilla's voice trembled, not from fear, but from the shock of his resolve. "So this is how it ends?" "That depends on you," he replied, not looking at her. "For now, this is necessary." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment something unreadable passed over her face. She turned without another word, her steps slow and measured. At the threshold of the royal wing, she paused, glancing back once, not with anger nor with pleading, but with a look so veiled it left no clue to her thoughts. Then she was gone. When the halls were empty again, Charles did not return to his desk. Instead, he left the study and stepped into the palace gardens. The crisp air met his face, carrying with it the scent of roses and damp earth. He walked the long gravel path, hands clasped once more behind his back, eyes distant. Every step brought back memories, Charlotte's playful laughter ringing through the halls, Louis's small hand gripping his during a walk, their joy when they found him waiting in the nursery. These moments warmed him, yet the thought that they might be diminished by cold politics made his jaw tighten. "Not while I draw breath," he murmured to himself. He reached a marble bench near the fountain and sat, staring at the rippling water. The weight of his crown had never felt heavier. Wealth could be passed down easily. Love and fairness required vigilance. That was the legacy he wanted, not just titles and lands, but a kingdom where each child in the family knew their worth beyond politics. But the question remained. Had he just made a choice that would protect that vision, or had he set in motion a chain that could shatter it? If word of Camilla's departure reached the public, there would be whispers. If those whispers grew, the monarchy itself might feel the strain. He pressed his fingers to his temple, letting the sound of the fountain steady him. After a long while, he stood, returning to his study with a mind still clouded by thought. Sitting at his desk, he pulled a fresh sheet of paper before him. The pen felt heavy in his hand as he began to write, not a royal decree, but a letter. "My dear William," the first line read, "I must explain to you in my own words why I have done what I have done today." So what truly was the content of that letter? How bad was it? Stick around. A letter that changed everything. The morning sun lay softly over the green fields surrounding their country home. The air was calm, almost too calm, as though it was holding its breath for what was about to come. Inside, the crackle of the fireplace was the only sound until the soft thud of an envelope hit the wooden table. Catherine reached for it, her delicate fingers hesitating for a moment. The royal seal glistened under the light. She glanced at William, who stood by the window, his gaze lost in the distant hills. "It's from your father," she murmured. William turned, his brow tightening. "Open it." She broke the seal and unfolded the letter slowly, as if the paper itself carried a weight. Her eyes began to move across the lines, but almost instantly her face paled. Her lips parted slightly, though no words came out at first. "Catherine?" William's voice carried a note of worry. She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "He's sent her away. Camilla. She's gone from the palace." For a moment, silence filled the room, pressing in from all sides. The flames in the hearth popped softly, but neither of them moved. William stepped closer, taking the letter from her hands. His eyes scanned the words, his jaw tightening with every sentence. His father's writing was steady, but the tone beneath it was heavy, the kind that came from a heart pushed to its limit. When he reached the final lines, William folded the paper slowly, setting it on the table with deliberate care. His voice was low, but every syllable held steel. He was right to do it. Catherine watched him closely. "You mean you agree with sending her away?" His gaze met hers, unwavering. "Yes, completely." They sat together by the fire, the letter lying between them like a silent witness. Catherine's mind began to wander back to small moments she had quietly tucked away, moments that now seemed sharper. She remembered a garden party 2 summers ago. Charlotte had run up to Camilla with a bouquet of tiny wildflowers she had picked herself. Instead of the warm embrace a child might expect, Camilla had taken the flowers with a polite smile and turned quickly to greet someone else. Catherine had noticed Charlotte's little shoulders slump, but she had brushed it off at the time. Then there was the Christmas luncheon. Louis had been laughing at the table, telling a story only a 6-year-old could tell, when Camilla had leaned over to speak with another guest, her attention drifting as though his words were unimportant. Catherine had caught William's subtle frown then, but neither of them had spoken about it afterward. Now those memories felt heavier. They were not just fleeting moments anymore. They were pieces of a pattern. Catherine leaned back, her voice quiet. "Perhaps we should have seen this coming." William didn't answer right away. He was staring into the fire, his mind turning over more than just memories. "I don't care how it looks in the papers," he said at last. "If Father believes this was necessary, then it was. I won't question him." "But you know what this could mean," Catherine reminded him gently. "The family, the public, they'll have questions." He turned to her, his expression firm. "Let them ask. My loyalty is to my father and to my children, not to keep the peace at the expense of what's right." There was a quiet strength in his tone, one Catherine recognized. William had always carried the weight of his role with a sense of duty, but now there was something else, a personal resolve that ran deeper than protocol. She reached for his hand, giving it a soft squeeze. "Then we stand together." His features softened just slightly as he nodded. "Always." They both knew the days ahead would not be easy. The press would whisper, the public would speculate, and within the palace walls tensions might rise. But in that warm sitting room with the letter between them and the fire casting a golden glow over their faces, a decision had been made. William rose and walked toward the window again, looking out over the fields as if he could see beyond them. Beyond the quiet hills, beyond the headlines that would soon come. "When the time comes," he said without turning, "I will speak for him, and I will not hold back." Catherine watched him, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and worry. She knew that when William set his mind to something, no storm could sway him. And this was no ordinary storm. So how did Camilla react to the message in secret? That's coming up next. The Queen in exile. The old stone walls of the secluded residence seemed to close in around her, their silence pressing heavily on her heart. Camilla sat by the wide window, staring out at the gardens that were not hers, the air heavy with a stillness she could not bear. The world outside looked calm, but inside her, a storm raged. She could still hear his voice, cold, sharp, and final, for now, and perhaps for good. The words had cut deeper than she had expected. She had thought she knew Charles's temper, thought she could weather his storms as she always had. But this time, there had been no storm to pass. Only the steady, chilling resolve of a man who had already made up his mind. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers tightening slowly. Betrayal burned in her chest. She had stood by him for years, through whispers, through criticism, through moments when even the public had doubted her place. She had made sacrifices more than anyone truly knew. Yet now it felt as though all of it had been dismissed with one simple command: leave. Her mind wandered back to the early years. The cautious glances, the guarded words, the endless effort to earn a place in a family that was not quick to forgive or forget. She had fought for her position, not with open battles, but with patience, charm, and the quiet persistence of someone who refused to be pushed aside. And now, she thought bitterly, she was being pushed aside again. She rose from the chair, walking slowly through the room. The polished floors reflected the faint afternoon light, and her reflection moved with her, a woman who had climbed too far to be cast away without a fight. She could not allow the story to be told without her voice. If it comes to it, she whispered to herself, I will not be painted as the villain. Her eyes hardened. If the truth, or his version of it, reached the public, she would be ready. She would defend her image, her place, and everything she had built. Whispers in the halls, laughter in the garden. The palace was never truly still, yet now its corridors carried a different kind of quiet, a watchful, weighted silence. Servants moved carefully, their footsteps light, their voices hushed. Something had changed, and though no one dared speak it aloud, everyone felt it. Camilla's absence was not just a space left behind, it was a presence of its own, a shadow stretching across every gilded wall and marble floor. Outside the palace gates, the press had already begun to circle. Cameras waited like patient predators. Rumors ran ahead of the truth, whispered into eager ears. Inside, the official line had been decided. Private matters, the palace statement read, short, polished, and impenetrable. The kind of words meant to protect, but which only stirred curiosity. Those who knew the truth said nothing. Those who guessed kept their voices low. And yet, in the stillness, tension grew. In the garden, the world was different. Here, the air was alive with birdsong and the gentle rustle of leaves in the summer breeze. The heavy air of the palace halls did not reach this place. Charlotte's laughter bubbled as she chased a butterfly, her small hands reaching for something she could never quite catch. Louis followed, his giggles ringing out like tiny bells, his shoes kicking up soft patches of grass. They did not know. They did not feel the heaviness that pressed on their grandfather's shoulders. For them, the day was only a day to play. Charles watched from a short distance, his hands clasped behind his back. The garden was a memory in motion, a reminder of what was precious and fragile. The sight of Charlotte's shining eyes and Louis's bright smile tugged at something deep inside him. He stepped forward, allowing himself to be pulled into their little world. "Grandpa, come here," Louis called, his small arms wide with invitation. Charles bent down, scooping him into his arms, the boy's laughter warming the chill that had settled in his chest these past days. Charlotte ran over, clutching a flower she had picked. "For you," she said softly, placing it in his hand. But this secret could never be sealed forever. It reached the public. How? Stay with us. Whispers that reached the world. The morning began like any other, but in the hidden corners of the city, something dangerous stirred. A whisper had escaped the palace walls, soft at first, like a secret shared between two shadows. But whispers, once free, have a way of growing louder. It started with a single call. Somewhere, far from the gold-lined rooms and marble corridors, A discreet insider spoke carefully, almost reluctantly. "There's been a dispute," they murmured, "over the king's will." The words were few, but they were enough to set the wheels in motion. By afternoon, the streets were buzzing, newsrooms lit up, reporters rushing with the urgency of hunters chasing prey. Printers roared, screens flashed, and headlines began to appear in bold, almost trembling letters. "Palace rift over king's will." Speculation moved faster than truth. In cafes and on street corners, strangers leaned close, trading theories as if they had been in the room themselves. Some spoke with pity in their voices. "Poor Camilla," they said, shaking their heads. Others clenched their fists. "The king is right to stand firm," they argued. Inside the palace, the air thickened. Conversations were hushed, footsteps lighter, eyes sharper. The silence in the grand halls was not the calm kind. It was the watchful kind, heavy with unspoken fears. Charles sat alone in his private study, the early evening light stretching across the desk. A newspaper lay folded before him, though he had read it only once. The words were burned into his mind. He did not move for a long time. The world outside might have been spinning in chaos, but he stayed still, his hands resting on the armrests of his chair. A single thought held him in place. "If I speak now, the fire will only grow." The last words between them. The palace felt still, as if it were holding its breath. In a room where the curtains hung low and the light came in soft and pale, King Charles waited. His hands rested on the arms of his chair, his gaze fixed on the door. This would be the first time he had seen her since she left, and perhaps the last in such a setting. The door opened quietly. Camilla stepped inside. She wore muted colors, a dress that did not seek to impress. Her face was pale, the lines of weariness clear. Yet she walked with the same grace she had carried for years, even if it seemed heavier now. "Charles," she began softly, her voice unsure. He did not move at first. "Camilla," he said, his tone steady but distant. For a moment neither spoke. The silence between them carried the weight of years, of shared triumphs, of battles fought together, and of the recent wound that still bled unseen. "I had to come," she said at last, taking a slow step forward, "not for the titles, not for the rooms I once sat in, but to tell you why." His eyes narrowed slightly, though his expression remained calm. "I have heard the reasons," he replied. "Not for me," she said, her voice trembling now. "I did what I did because I believed it was my duty. I thought I was protecting what we had built, protecting you. It was not malice, Charles. Never malice." He studied her in silence. Her words were careful, yet there was a crack in them, the sound of someone reaching for what was slipping away. "I made sacrifices for this life," she went on. "You know them better than anyone. I endured the whispers, the cold stares, the headlines that called me unworthy. And I stayed because I believed in us. I believed in you." Charles's gaze shifted to the window for a moment, where the late afternoon light painted the sky in soft gold. "Belief is not the same as trust," he said quietly. Her lips parted, as if to speak again, but no words came. The truth of his statement lingered in the air, too heavy to push aside. "You acted," he continued, his voice low but firm, "without me. You decided for both of us, without my knowledge, on a matter that touched my family deeply. That I cannot overlook." Camilla's shoulders sank, yet she took another step toward him. "If I could go back—" "But you cannot," he interrupted, his tone still controlled. "And even if you could, the choice was made, the damage done." Her eyes glistened. "So that is it? After everything?" He let out a slow breath, as though the words themselves were heavy to release. "You will remain away from the heart of the palace. You will have no role in inheritance matters. This is my decision, Camilla, and it is final." The air between them felt colder now. Camilla straightened slightly, drawing on the remnants of her dignity. "Very well," she said, though her voice was faint. Charles looked at her one last time. There was no anger in his eyes, only a deep sadness, the kind that came from knowing something could never be as it once was. She turned toward the door. Her steps were slow, but steady. At the threshold, she paused, her hand resting on the frame. For a brief moment, she seemed as if she might turn back. But she didn't. She walked on, leaving the room as quietly as she had entered. But this isn't the end of it all. There's a new storm brewing. Watch closely, the next hit might shake the monarchy to its core.